kinak semdol kake mo faseda.
Hey everyone, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to Talking Stations. I am Silver Suspiria from Federation Uprising. With me today is Lord Servant of the Forsaken Empire. How's it going, Lord?
Hey, good. Glad to be
Oh, I might not have heard you there, Lord. One more time.
Oh, hey, it's good. Glad to be here. Is that working?
I think so.
There we go.
So today I'm alone. I'm not with my friend Artemis. Artemis has some really good stuff going on in real life. So he may not be able to host the show any longer, but he will still be working diligently on the background of the midweek show. I'll miss him. But that being said, we are looking for a co-host to join me here on the midweek show. If you are interested, stop by the Talking Stations Discord and look that up. Always good to have a partner in crime. But today it's just you and me, Lord, and we're talking about our series Vale the Violent, which is coined by Artemis, and I love it because it's been a fantastic region to cover. Lots of groups up there duking it out, drama, lots of different little entities working together on and off, and you guys have been a big part of that. So I'm going to turn it over to you. Maybe just give us a little bit of history on yourself, Lord. Where did you come up in Eve? What's your flavor?
So I'm Lord Servant. I've been playing since about 2005. Done a lot of small ganging.
What's your flavor?
I guess the relevant stuff to most people would be, as part of the original old school NC dot kind of raiding, dropping Titans on things. I had a Titan PvP video, I believe the first. Salah had the second, and you might have heard from more recent, I guess, there's the Dunk Phoenix, and of course our shenanigans that are going on in Vale now, and my excellent Reddit posting, which is primo.
Oh, I'm totally a big fan of your videos, that's for sure.
Yep. But yeah.
So talk to me about the formation of your corporation and Forsaken Empire. How'd that all come to be? What's the history?
So Forsaken Empire was originally formed by my brother, Win Jackal. He's the senior alliance leader. Everyone likes to call it my group. It's not just my group; it's his group as well. But we are a bunch of guys. I guess with our roots in Black Serpent Technologies, we're part of the culture. We went to NC Northern Coalition, and basically after that, the game has been in a shitty state for a while. And I remember I think it was a year and a half, 2 years ago, the 9-TAC4 blob fests and the whole tie-dye 800-man Titan fights is just not very engaging gameplay. It's not interesting. We were all kind of getting burnt out on that. So we decided rather than quit the game, we would go ahead, split off, and just play the game our way. So everything about us speaks to that. The alliance name itself, actually, Forsaken Empire. Some vets might remember it as a alliance way back with I think Krulls, which was my first CEO. CDI, he was a crazy guy, but we just kind of like to play the game the old school way, and we've been doing a fun job of that so far.
Just so what's the old school way? Yeah, tell me what it is you're trying to recapture.
So, I mean, people who have been playing recently have never experienced anything other than be part of a coalition that spans multiple regions. And in that coalition, all you do is crab. You have little war games or something like, the Horde has their, I think it's LXQ or something, is their no drop zone. But everywhere else, it's just Vorkals and bots and dropping supers on people as far as the eye can see. And that's just not particularly engaging gameplay. Old school, things were a lot more regional, localized, and there were all sorts of grudges and stuff. Like Jade Constantine would make all sorts of posts and stuff. Like there was the whole hate between Ushrakan and CVA, and you got the Bob versus Goons. Like there's a lot more people got along less, I guess is the best way to put it. And basically stuff wasn't there was more raw energy. There was more content focused stuff. People didn't people shot people just to shoot people. People didn't shoot people just because their members were bored. Like our content is shooting people, and that's what we enjoy doing. We don't have a massive super fleet. We don't Oracle crab. We don't have endless Ishtars running havens in every single one of our systems. Like that's not that's most nullsec, but for us, it's not. It's just a group of people that, I know the people in my alliance. It's not member number 5,678. Like everything matters. Every person matters, and that's a lot more fun to be part of, rather than being part of a faceless member in a massive coalition where you have no control over anything.
Yeah, I totally get the struggle. FedUp's part of a big coalition, and sometimes we struggle on making a name for ourselves and standing out on our own. So it's good to see you guys do that. How did you wind up in Vale the Silent? And if your goals aren't really to monetize nullsec, why did you choose nullsec as the place to be at the moment?
So we chose Vale. Originally, we were up in Scalding Pass, fighting with these two groups, funnily enough, Quote and Toilet Paper, along with Frat and a couple other groups. And it was fun for a little bit. And eventually it kind of devolved into this boring time zone tanking war, and nothing much was really happening. And then, of course, the Imperium went and glassed Vale. Vale tribute all the northern areas. And of course, NC went to the drone regions, which the drone regions are fantastic. Outside of Delve, like Delve itself is almost like a more compact version of the drone regions. Because the drone regions, the jump ranges, you can hit a whole bunch of stuff. Similar to the way Delve, the region, is architected. But basically, we moved to Vale because of the vacuum in power, and it looked like a good opportunity for content, and so far it has been.
Yeah, I would say it really worked out because you and a bunch of other guys had a similar idea to move into this region that had been glassed, was free for the taking, and lots of close range combat. So, who is it that you hooked up with? You got a coalition going on up there, a little group of friends.
Kind of. It started off as, so we moved in, and we were shooting this group next to us. Reverberation Project. I recognized a couple of them. I used to fight them back when a lot of us were in the culture up in Fountain. And they were good to fight. It was a little bit back and forth. Wrote at the same time. I think they've covered that a little bit, but basically they were doing similar stuff in tribute. It looked like a good opportunity. So basically they came down. We were a little bit sloppy. I think we were anchoring a Fortizar in some random system, and it wasn't really set up communication, and they went and killed it, and they just were shit talking and smack talking nonstop about that. And then, of course, I think like a day or two later, we went and curb stomped one of their forts. No Visual was at the time one of their members, and they had dropped a fort, I believe, in the top right system up in the Gekje pocket. If you look at the map of Vale, is in the very top left. So we killed that, and then they kind of realized, oh shit, this isn't some random group that we can just curb stomp smack around. Like, these guys are actually going to fight us, and they realized really quickly they couldn't do that. So they started recruiting alliances, and it got to the point where originally was wrote in Unspoken and No Visual, and then they started adding people in. They said NSH started helping them. They had Just a Game start helping them. They brought in what's that other group that's still around? I think. I forget exactly who it was, but they kept bringing more and more groups, and it got to the point where, FE alone, we've always been incredibly small. We were even smaller back then. We didn't have the numbers. So with Echo being next to us, it basically ended up being it was a good situation. Like they were being shot at as well. So it's, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. So we ended up just working with them due to the geographical location and the fact that we had a common enemy. And we've been able to, hold our own, had a lot of back and forth fights with them. And of course, they tend to, for all their talk, we found that they added a new alliance. Cone, that's what it was. Pinecone Squad.
Oh, right, Cones, yep.
Yeah, so Pinecone, and you've also got recently Fwedded, or Chickens, Free Range Chickens, whatever the group is, that is. So
yeah, interesting. So on last week's show, we were talking about your alliance as the other side, and they called it FICO. That is not what you guys call your alliance, I would say, or coalition. It's not FICO.
Yeah, it's basically, so we started off with we called it DEF, or Fed Coalition, DEF, which were the three. So Echo brought in another group at the time, Divinity, which are a little bit of a newer player group, but we like to have more people moving in. So they were part of it at the time. It was Divinity, Echo, and Forsaken Empire, and Echo and Divinity. Divinity there's a whole different story on that. We can probably get into later when we start talking about we call them Pony Boys, but a whole different story about that. But basically, that's we changed our name. There is no official name. I like to say FE, the initials of my alliance, but it's also the elemental symbol of iron, which I think fits our diplomacy style and gameplay style very well.
Yeah, and I totally like that name better than Fico. It is
much better.
More just better description of how you guys fight and how you view things. So we had Promi on the show last week, and so you guys tangle with him and his group a lot. Is that your main source of content usually?
On and off. I mean, for a while it was. Initially, that's all it was. They were just constantly trying to kick us out, and we were constantly defending. And of course, we just loved all the timers. It was just nonstop back and forth. Recently, we haven't fought them as much. We fight them on and off still, but they kind of are on the tribute half, and they were messing the darkness and stuff. So it might pick back up. Who knows? But we basically fight whoever is in the area. So, for example, the main conflict right now is between us and the whole frat kind of block, which actually tied to most of the people we're fighting. So other than Run Spokone or Rockapella or Cola or CFC, whoever you want to call that alliance.
That's what I wanted to get into. So like he was calling his alliance the CFC, but really there's just a group of players and they're known by whatever the flavor of the week is.
Yeah, pretty much. I don't think either one of us have particular things. We like to call them Petco sometimes because we joke that they're all pets of Rogue Capel or vice versa. I think that Promi was calling himself CFC because the last time that I was really involved in the North, other than the NC thing with last year, was way back in the day when I was part of the original NC just before I became part of Raiden. When the DRF, Drone Region Federation, Drone Russian Federation, we want to call them, when we kicked a lot of people may know, but the name Northern Coalition, the alliance, was based off of an actual coalition that used to live up in the north. Tau Ceti Federation, Morsis Mihi, Razor, and a whole bunch of other pet alliances. But they were, before there was Goons and the Imperium or the CFC, they were the big blob. So basically, he's joking that they're the blob and we're the elite PvPers, fighting them. So they've kind of abandoned their any kind of pretense of that they're the small guys, because they're not.
Yeah, I would say they could put together some numbers. Like I would say when I was up there, the more steady groups that fought together was Unspoken and Rote. Really, they kind of live right next to each other, and they kind of help each other out all the time. And then there's some of these other groups will come in occasionally, I guess, depending on what the objective is or if they had nothing else to do that evening. Does that sound about right?
Kind of, maybe. I mean, I know they've worked very closely with Pinecone Squad, apparently. And so basically what happened is we have a big timer. I think they had at least a couple on their jump bridge. We actually killed it at least once. But basically, any time that we form big numbers and it would look like an even fight, they bat phone Pinecone, and Pinecone would bring in a bunch of Ravens and triage. And they've been pretty serious about flexing the fact they have more numbers and more caps, as far as that's their main tactic is more numbers, more caps. So they drop triage on pretty much everything. And more recently, I say recently, it's been a couple weeks, maybe a month, we were flexing back with caps and they couldn't match us. And then they asked free range chickens to come, and free range chickens combined with Pinecone brought 30 or 40 dreads or something to a fight where we dropped, we had 10 to 15 dreads versus our 10 to 15-ish dreads. So they realized it would be a fair fight, so they had to have more caps. And that kind of has put a damper on us using caps in free space, because we can't compete with, not to mention the subcap numbers, an additional 30, 40 dreads on top of that. And if you look, there was a recent conflict we had with Trigger Happy, where we were absolutely mopping the floor with them in USTZ. They were more Trigger EU TZ at the time. And Road & Co. came to bail them out with caps. So that's pretty much the story, is that whenever we try to use caps in open space, we'll be dunking, and then everyone around us will blob up and come shoot just us. So it happens.
Yeah, because I guess you guys are the big bad wolf. So how big is your alliance right now? Like, what do your numbers look like?
So I was looking. I just for fun. I think probably was saying something about things being even. I actually ran the numbers. I think the day after. So these numbers might be a little bit off because I hear Trigger is having some issues with numbers recently. But at the time, the combined numbers basically for us, the characters in alliance between Forsaken Empire and Reverberation Project was 1125, and we have about 155 active PvPers. Forsaken Empire of that is 366 characters in alliance with 66 active characters in PvP. So looking at the like Run, Spokone, Petco, Rockapella, whatever you want to call them, just that group has, I want to say, 1578, 79 characters and 227 active PvPers. So just them alone have more numbers than us. But it'll be a fair fight, 150-ish versus 220-ish. That's fightable.
Yeah, I gotcha. So yeah, by most standards, you're a pretty small to medium-sized alliance, right? And seems like you got a lot of groups that combine onto you sometimes. Talk to me about the other horses, the Lord of Worlds thing. Like, you fight them lately too, yeah?
We do on and off. So that actually started, there was a conflict with, if you look at the map of Vale, it might actually be helpful to pull a map of Vale up. I can show the different parts of it.
Let me see if I can get that.
Okay.
Go ahead, keep talking. I'll find it.
If you look in the middle of Vale, there's a very big dead end pocket, almost directly, if you look at the map itself, below our pocket, and that is where Scumlord Coalition, whatever their alliance name is, they live there. And we've had a lot of content with them back and forth. They're basically a good source of small game content for us because we do outnumber them quite a bit, and they've just been good content. But the problem, they are actually, I admire their will and tenacity as far as PvPers. They're relatively cool dudes. Only problem is they've got there's several bots we've gotten reports of in their pocket. Like we report them, we get emails from CCP. And the same thing goes for, I think there's a one system Parabellum owns. Yeah, if you look at the map right there, 97 TAC M96. So all down that kind of pocket, there's just, they moved in solely to make ISK. And if you look at some of the battle reports, most of them are frat alts. We thought they were all frat alts originally, but they've kind of grown to be their own thing just a little bit more. But basically, we were fighting them back and forth. There ended up being some drama between Divinity and Echo. I'm not sure of the details of it, but basically they ended up not getting along too well. And at the time, there's an alliance called Lord of Worlds, which was moving into Vale apparently for some content. They're Lord of Worlds. I am Lord's servant. So when people said, "Oh, it's Lord" or "It's Lords," I'm like, "Huh? Who? What? Me?" So that's, it's very confusing. So if you look at their logo, it's like a unicorn. So it's we call them Pony Boys. Is the best way to put it. And they basically got an overinflated ego about it and were trying to dictate to us a fight club in Vale, and they would confirm things and, like, we need to surrender and blah, blah, blah. We just told them to fuck right off. And we ended up kicking them out of Vale. Them and Slice were the two main groups. We had several good fights. I think there's a BR I've linked a couple times somewhere, where basically we were just stomping the shit out of them. And actually Rote ended up coming for third party at the very end. But every fight basically went like that, where they would just lose horribly because they were flying outdated doctrines, from the Null Blob, which aren't good at our scale. And we just stomped them until, Pandemic Horde, I think, dropped 50 caps or something on the biggest one. We killed the structure, about to kill their 8 or 9 Hod Reds, and, we had to bail because of that.
Yeah, what kind of doctrines? Because we fought Lord of Worlds when they lived down south during the Frat War a lot, and they were a good matchup for us at the time. They liked their Shield Macarials and Osprey Navies a lot. They're still flying that kind of stuff?
We haven't seen Macarials or Osprey Navies from them. What we saw mostly against them was they like to fly a lot of Feroxes, which are, I think Feroxes are horrible.
Yeah,
back in the day,
I hate them.
Yeah. Back in the day, it was Drakes, and now it's Feroxes. It's always, and it's just, they're very boring to fight. They're very bad. Like, they rely on basically having a big, fuck off blob. If you have 250 Feroxes, your guns cycle fast stuff. You're gonna insta pop stuff with those numbers anyways, and it works very well at the null blob level. For us, we can't necessarily, form 250 people, and neither could they on their own. So those just did not work effectively at all. I think they tried to pull similar. We have a Loki fit we use every so often. I think they tried to pull those, and again, they didn't really have the numbers or the execution to properly use those either, and they just got stomped on pretty hard. So that's we fly doctrines that pretty much no one else flies right now, which is entertaining, but.
Yeah, I mean, we've fought you a few times, and the problem with the Ferox is those medium railguns are kind of the suck unless you have like 100 of them, right? They don't do a ton of damage on their own, so unless you can get a critical mass, they're not doing that much damage. And they're a big fat battle cruiser, which gets run down by Munins and a lot of other things. So those kind of struggle in the size of fights that you guys get into. But what I do like is the Gila, and you guys fly that quite often. 100 MN Gilas too, in general, like sniper fit?
Kind of. So the Gila goes back to when they were first rebuffed. As a joke, I was talking about making them a doctrine. This would have been, I don't know, 2013, 14, somewhere in there. I was in wormhole space at the time, but I ended up doing some testing, and I noticed basically that the medium drones applied very well. They're medium drones that hit as hard as heavies, but they apply like mediums. And in wormhole space at the time, before CCP completely dumpstered that whole meta with faxes with injectors, subcapology mattered quite a fair amount. So basically, you instead of bashing blaster Proteuses, which was the meta at the time, into each other, or ham sacrileges or damnations, we found with Gillas, we could, with drone assist, you could basically volley any Guardian, no matter how blingy it was. So in wormhole fights, you could basically just, headshot all of their logi with fast swapping and just the coordinate alpha and good application of the medium drones. You'd like two-shot even the brickiest of Guardians. So that's where those came from originally. And of course, then when I ended up leaving wormhole space after, is a different story. But basically, I ended up bringing them with me to nullsec, and they ended up working just as well. And I think I made the swap to 100 MN once I was in nullsec because, we ended up fighting outnumbered a lot against Horde actually at the time. We'd fly up to their space when they were up in, I think, the other end of Cloud Ring. And there were good fights back and forth there, but they would swarm us with scram frigates, so we had to swap to 100 MN for that reason. And they've just been fantastic and tried and true ever since. So
yeah, I mean, they're burly ships, right? Nice and tanky, and the way you guys have it fit with those Valkyrie drones, you could quick swap targets real quick. Like when we were fighting you, I think we were using acolytes or whatever our drone is, and your drone blob would just be like whoo, 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 and we're like doop, 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 like so yeah, very effective for the gang that you guys are fighting in.
Mm-hmm.
So there was you had a lot of running with Trigger too. So Trigger is another, or was, or still is. I'm confused about what the state of Trigger is right now, but you had a couple of run-ins with Pittsburgh and his crew up there too. How does that play into the whole political scene there?
So Trigger mostly kept to themselves. They were very, very girthy alliance for the area. In EU time zone, I don't think a single group, or even all the groups combined, could really fuck with them too much with the numbers that they had. But they didn't really abuse it. I don't know what they were doing really, but it wasn't really a thing. They basically stayed to themselves in tribute. We fought them. We fought with them. For a while, there was this kind of trifecta rock, paper, scissors sort of thing where Trig and Rote were shooting each other a little bit, and we would go back and forth shooting whoever third partying. I could talk about, so recently we lost the Fortizar. We haven't lost the Fortizar in a long, long, long time, but basically we were out roaming, and I saw a Sino on a random Raytaru, I think it was, in Null, and this was a low power Raytaru. And I went to kill the Sino. Unfortunately, the Sino was about to end. He docked. It's not an arc, but he docked and he logged off. And I was like, let's shoot the low power Raytaru, see what happens. We were shooting that, and then he logged back in. And I don't know if you have the quote. You can pull it up, but basically he threatened us and told us he was going to flip Trig to help Rote, and they would evict us in like a week or something if I didn't dare stop shooting his structure, which I thought was fucking hilarious. Like the whole point of us, going to, and becoming our own group was to tell people like that to fuck right off, which is what I did. Like this isn't some nullsec power play thing. Like, we're a small group, and we're very aware if a block with, that can form, 500 people or whatever, like if they can form a couple hundred people, we're not going to go to do anything against that, and they'll brand our stater anyways. Like that's our thing. So I basically told him to fuck right off, and he had a little tiff about that, and sure enough, I want to say a couple days later, basically, they ref the GecJ fort, and it has a more story behind that, basically, but it was set to a really shitty time zone, unfortunately, which was actually good for toilet paper and quote. Which there's so many stories. There's another story about how they got there with the DDoS, but that's probably for another discussion.
No, let's go down that hole a little bit, because I first started hearing about you guys, and I think we had been contacted about that whole DDoS story and how you were having a lot of space reft because you couldn't get your dudes logged in, because you got a lot of U.S. time zone guys, right? And they were the hardest hit. And believe me, my alliance suffered too, and we couldn't get people in. So how tell me a little bit about that and how frustrating it was to watch this happen and not be able to do anything about it.
It was pretty horrible. None of us could log in. A few of us could log in with VPNs or something, VPN which were kind of slow and laggy. And if you look at I think I have a video I released recently, free plug. But basically, a lot of our content came from flying around in small gang ships that are incredibly expensive, and that's very sketchy to do when you're on a VPN or low stuff. And again, with numbers wise, we couldn't really do much. So the two constellations we choose to hold is the YTAC Z pocket, which is in the middle I was talking about, which we still hold to this day. And the GecJ pocket was actually a major conflict driver between us and the Tribute group, the Petco and all them. So that was actually fantastic. But basically, we held that, and the DDoS came in, and like the very next day, fucking Quote and TP had basically moved themselves in. They toasted everything. They dropped a bunch of structures, and we couldn't do jack shit because we couldn't log in. But they could log in no problem, which was the problem. We fought them once, and they lost pretty bad. But we couldn't. The next time they were more careful, and they formed up better numbers, and we couldn't do anything because of the DDoS. And I think in the matter of the DDoS was, I want to say 9 or 10 days was really the prime. Like couldn't even fucking log in. Pardon my language.
Solid 2 weeks. No, it's okay.
But yeah, so basically I think within 2 or 3 days of them getting their iHubs and stuff up, they basically botted everything up to 5. And, toilet paper are French, quote, are Russian. And, even was reporting them and getting emails from CCP. We weren't able to, they were able to get their ADMs up. And at that point, it was pretty much a lock because we're very USTZ heavy, and they were, very, RU and EU heavy. So all their stuff's timed for that, and we basically at this point can't properly contest that to kick them out. That's the way the mechanics work, which is really really frustrating, really annoying, because the mechanics are supposed to favor the defender. They're Russian and EU. If we'd been able to do our stuff, we would have been more than fine. It might have made some progress, but it would have been a good fight, good content. And instead, they just kind of rolled in, got their stuff up, and then ratted everything up, and then we were locked out of our own space, basically, which was really shitty. So I forget where I was going with that. The GecJ pocket, something about that.
Well, let's move to more about what you're up to now. You mentioned a little bit earlier that you have been fighting Frat recently, and I have a battle report here of the aforementioned Gilas that you fly. Outnumbered about 2-1 here, and you guys did pretty fantastic. You can pull that up.
Yeah. So basically, it used to be Divinity, and basically, Vale, similar to a couple of regions, I'm sure, since the jump changes with Phoebe, which I'm sure for some people is just the only thing they've ever known. But basically, the region is kind of split into halves. One half you can hit everything with a Titan bridge or jump reds and stuff, and the other half you really can't. So Frat basically during the whole darkness thing kind of moved a couple people into the eastern side of Vale, whereas we nominally control the western side of Vale, and Scum's kind of like right in the middle there on the bottom, but they're nominally Western Vale. But so we've been no visual after Echo kicked them out of the pocket close to the iPay gate, the very entrance. Basically ended up moving over, and so we were still shooting them, and Frat started defending them. We think they're renting from Frat basically at this point. So yeah, we had a couple good fights. This one that he's showing on screen right now there's an Athenor. I think they were anchoring an Athenor on some kind of a moon. So we decided to go and shoot it, and Frat showed up with a bunch of hurricanes, and we dumpstered them. I mean, I think that's the only thing that you really say about that.
Yeah, I mean, when I saw this battle report, like how impressive, and this just shows you the power of like knowing what your group size is and flying a comp that suits you, and the Gila is like the perfect comp for a group your size as far as punch power and tankability. And you really only do this with 2 Bassies. There had to be more that just didn't show up on the.
No, I want to say we had 4 or 5 Bassies. We lost one. The only things we lost was basically because we were a little bit too close. I think at the start or something. It was just a couple oopsies. But once we got things set up, it was a pretty smooth sailing there. And yeah, I mean the Gillas. It's basically, it kind of highlights the difference is that we're small, but we emphasize quality. Like all my guys they're good PvPers. We're in Vale to PvP. Whereas I'm not sure what the Frat perspective is, but a lot of people in nullsec are more focused on care bearing and just making their space safety. Like PvP is a necessity to care bear, whereas for us it's the opposite. Making ISK on the side is a necessity so we can go PvP. That's what we do. So
yeah, so this conflict continues, and I'll bring up another battle report, like where you guys looks like you stepped it up a notch to Loki's. But so what is it? Does Frat keep coming by? Is this like a Sig or Frat? Like, what are they after? Do you know? Like, what's the story there? They keep coming to your space, RFing stuff.
So we're not entirely certain. There's actually a cool guy from Frat that I talked to on the actually TIS Discord. Plug for TIS Discord. It's a great place to talk about linked battle reports. You should be on it. But basically, he was saying they were coming up there for content. So we're hoping that they're not going to blob. I mean, it's in my numbers when I look at the what we're fighting, I don't really include Frat's true numbers because obviously if Frat wanted to get 500 people and pull the glass us, they could absolutely do that. We can't counter drop their supers, and if they have 500 2 separate 250 man unit fleets, we're not going to do shit about that either. So. But so far it's been, relatively engaging. Like I said, we'll fight, 100 to 150 people, with, half that number or less. Like that's doable for us. So that's what we've been doing so far. I'm not sure what they want other than that. I'm reading something. I guess we were joking about their renters paying us rent or something. I guess that's, very serious business because renting is a very serious business for them. So they might have been upset by that. I'm not sure what the full details are, but they've been running around, and more importantly, Pony Boys, Lord of Worlds, have come back, and so they didn't get enough of. We joke about beating a dead horse. They didn't get enough the first time that they came back for a round 2. So we're definitely looking forward to that. I think I actually have a war report on that somewhere.
Yeah, I see there's a couple linked. Let me see if I can find it here. There's a couple war reports you linked me.
Yeah, you should. If you find the one with Lord of Worlds on it, or at least maybe one of the battle reports. There's a battle report. I think I linked. Let's see if I can look at our collection of links right here. I'm going to say the ones just above what does horse meat taste like. One of those should have the fight I was talking about, actually, where Horde ended it by siloing in about 50 carriers.
I see.
I'm not sure which one of those, if you pull that up. And the nice thing about this, actually, is that, Frat are very obviously the big blob of the area. Like, even if you say, for example, like, whatchamacallit, the road has a blob. They have a bunch of alliances. They're blobbier than us, but they're not a blob. Frat is a blob. So it's nice that there's a couple other smaller groups you find, like in this particular battle report here. Brotherhood of Spacers, after splitting off from Test, has actually been up in the area and doing some fun stuff. And they've been kind of nominally, they've gone back and forth being third party with us, against us on different things. But generally speaking, against the big blobs, these smaller groups kind of tend to shoot them when they shoot us. In this particular battle report, I think it was over the Ritaro we were shooting, and we basically, we formed and we were, shooting them for ages, and they just kept feeding us more and more stuff. You look at the BR, they reshipped to Loki's from Ferox's. They go back and forth, and Rote ended up coming in at the very end with Nightmares to help us grind through. They had, I want to say, 8 or so Hodreds that were all tethered on the Asbel and bubbled the Asbel, the Raytard or whatever, when we killed it. And right as we killed them, they were about to start feeding all their caps. Horde signed in like a bunch of supers and like 50 or so carriers. And we, obviously had to fuck off. They didn't really kill anything, so I don't think the full numbers show. But we had to leave after that because we can't. If someone drops 100 carriers or whatever, a bunch of supers, like we can't do anything to that. So, but we had a whole bunch of fights similar to that where it was just us fighting them and them not really adapting or learning, and then having to get bailed out by the other people in their coalition. So we kind of expect this to be similar, where anytime Pony Boys try anything on their own or with Slice, like it's just not going to happen. They're going to have Frat come bail them out if Frat does pull up with huge, massive numbers.
Yeah, and again, the Helas triumph again over a lot of those different comps. I keep hitting on that because it's just a good boat, and you guys make very good use of it.
I mean, yeah, as I've been flying them as a doctrine. I like to say I invented the Gila doctrine because I've been flying them since they got buffed. But yeah, I mean, I have an incredible amount of experience with them, and we know how they fly. We know what their limits are and what you can engage with them. We don't only fly Gilas though. We fly Gilas, we fly Abaddons, we fly Napox, we fly Typhoons, we fly a whole bunch of other stuff.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's what Gilas are just a very good go-to for us as far as a lot of situations. Like there's not really any particularly easy way to counter them. People have tried smart bombs in the past. Before they got nerfed, people used to try smart bombs all the time, and smart bombs did nothing. Now, if you really, really try hard, you might be able to counter Gilas with a lot of smart bombs, but you need a lot of smart bombs. I mean, we had, I have to find the link somewhere, but basically, I remember we were fighting, I want to say Quote and Trigger, and they brought, I think, 2 Rokes fitted with large smart bombs, and we killed them with Gilas. Yeah, we killed them with Gilas.
Like, maybe the Nightmare fleet I see Trigger fly sometimes, and they have a bunch of smart bombs. That can be annoying for the Gila, but really, smart bombs are not a counter to Helas, and I've seen that flying them myself.
Yep.
Even post drone nerf. So let's talk about the future. What does the future look for you guys? What does the future look for the region? Like I see Frat coming down now. That's a recent development. That seems like it's really late U.S. time zone. And until late, you really haven't had any major block interference with the region, right? You haven't had like any interest from NC or before the war, Deadco, or no one's come down there to really mess with you too much. But Frat poking around, is that concerning to you? Is that a change of interest, or what? What do you see?
It's not really concerning. Like I said, it's a lot of people get stressed out over things they have no control over. So as far as I'm concerned, if they want to bring 500 people and glass the region, they're going to bring 500 people and glass the region. That's not something that I can do anything about. So I'm just going to take the fights as we can get them. Like if they bring 100, 150 Hurricanes, yeah, we'll fight them. Win some, lose some. As long as it's fightable, we'll fight it, and we'll have great content. And I'm looking forward to that. If they bring a massive blob, we'll just move our shit out, and thanks to broken asset safety, we'll lose basically nothing. Which is that's still very depressing to me. That it is just no. I don't know. They took the risk out of it,
right? Like the one thing I like about Wormhole Space, and I don't really love Wormhole Space. I don't think it would ever be for me. But the one thing I do like is that you get these final stand scenarios. Like, if I don't defend this, I'm just losing everything, right? And that creates like a heightened sense of like drama and energy to the whole thing. Like I've seen some evictions where people are, their Fortizar blows up and cans spill all over the place, and people are just jumping in the cans, pulling the ship out, jumping in the ship, and continuing to fight. I love that stuff, and that's not something you see in the rest of space because you blow up my fort. Yeah, I don't want to see it happen. Yeah, it kind of sucks, but I'll just go to another spot.
Yep. No, I mean that's the same thing. At a large scale example, you look at NC when they NC and Panda fam when they moved to the drone regions. The CFC last, what was it, 5, 6, 7 keep stars? They lost a couple of keep stars, which is it's a trillion-esque, but like there's no reason. It's like they would rather lose $1 trillion and keep stars and just set up somewhere else and get it all back in like a month, rather than actually fight over it. Especially with the Titan fleets, which are multiple trillions at this point. What, 100 Titans? Back in the day, a Titan was 100 bill, give or take. Now it's like 50 bill plus fittings. I don't know, but even with that, they're just like, we're gonna write off $1.5 trillion of keep stars and just go over the joint regions and not worry about it. Like that's really unfortunate that the scale has gotten that far, and that it actually it's annoying.
Yeah. So what about you guys? What do you want to see for the foreseeable future?
We're looking forward to good fights. Honestly, like I said, we're hopefully going to get some good content here against Frat. Like I said, they haven't brought 800 people yet, so hopefully we can just keep getting those good fights and keep some content going. That's really what we're all about, is the PvP and the small to mid-size sort of scale. So hopefully it'll be good content.
Anything else that we didn't cover that you want to talk about what you've been up to, your group, or drama we may have missed?
I don't think there's any particular drama I can think of offhand right now. I'm sure there'll be some the next time someone does a Reddit post. There always is. But no particular, nothing too much right there. Obviously, we're recruiting. My corp, the Envoys, is obviously recruiting. I think a couple other corps may be recruiting in our alliance. We're looking for PvP-oriented folks who enjoy flying small gang and want something drastically different than being a faceless line member in 1,000-person blob.
Yeah. How do we find you?
You can find us, obviously, on the soft map in Vale. You can convo myself, Lord Servant, in game. And we have 2 different channels. One of them is Oatmeal, just the word Oatmeal. That's my personal channel. And there's also another channel, Envoy Lounge, which I believe is our public channel as an alliance. And of course, individual corps may have individual things as well. But that's probably the best way to find us.
Fantastic. Do you have a public Discord or anything people can jump on, or anything like that?
We have a Discord. There's a public channel in it. I wouldn't say it's really a public Discord, but I mean, if you fly with us, obviously a lot, people who aren't with us, we have a friends channel for that, but it's not really a public Discord per se. I'd say the in-game channels are just talking to us is usually the best way of doing things.
Okay, got it. The last bit of part of the show here, we don't have a whole lot of news, but there is a big buzz out of LowSec, and I don't know how much you want to chime in on this one, Lord, but let me pull up the post here. But Faction Warfare on LowSec is going to get some love coming in the late March patch.
Yeah. I'm actually kind of looking forward to that. Way back in the day, I used to make a lot of my money from Faction Warfare. Myself and Predator Elite go way back, and at that time we were both in Amar Faction Warfare doing stuff. So I know a little bit about Faction Warfare mechanics, and I think that especially they're giving people a suspect timer when they go into the plexes, I think it goes a long way towards helping. It still doesn't stop. I don't think they ever fixed the militia AWACSing issue, but I mean, that's...
No, the AWACSing is tough, but you're right. One of the biggest changes, and there's a lot of changes here that I completely agree with, and that the player base has been calling for a long time. But what you're mentioning is, in Faction Warfare LowSec, you have these complexes. They're combat complexes that range in size from novice to large, right? And different size ships can fit in there. But they are combat sites. So if you're a Faction Warfare pilot, you fly into the novice or your frigate, and you're looking to fight. You're looking to contest that space. And somebody that's not in Faction Warfare, who has neutral security status, flies into that complex, and you shoot him first, you take a security hit. That's the most ridiculous mechanic I've ever seen in my life, because that neutral character flew into that site willingly ready to engage in combat, and you get a security hit for it, and keeps you out of high sec. It causes all kinds of issues. So now they're looking at, if you click activate on that acceleration gate and you go into that complex, you will be hit with a suspect tag, so that no one takes a security hit during the combat. which I think is a great change.
Oh, yeah, it's definitely fantastic because back in the day I was almost neg 10. I think it was I wasn't worried about
true
it.
neg 10 for a while.
Yeah,
like true neg 10.
Nice. So that's what I'm saying. So stuff like that. I mean, some people don't care, but if you do care, especially if you're flying around, for example, the slicer was incredibly popular for a long time, and that's a kiting ship. So if you're in a slicer as an Amara person, a thing, and some pirate rolls up with a Fed Navy Comet, the way you win that is obviously you keep your range and don't let him scram you. If you can't shoot him until he shoots you, he's not going to shoot you until he's got a scram on you. It's like you were basically forced to either fuck off or actually engage and get the suspect timer. And I think that's it's definitely a good change. So people who care about sex status can just go ahead and shoot the Comet rather than having to worry about letting them get in scram range, basically.
Agreed. A couple other things that the Amara guys, the Amara Mimitar guys, were pushing for a couple months ago with their whole treaty was to rebalance the way loyalty points is given out in faction warfare, because one of their main complaints was that non-participants in the actual effort of faction war would farm the missions that you can get, and that they would make a lot of ISK just running the missions for whoever was winning at the time, whatever faction was winning at the time, right? Because you get a lot of loyalty points that you can spend in the store, and a lot of those loyalty point store items are worth a lot. But now it looks like they're looking to rebalance that, taking less loyalty points from the warfare missions and giving it to actual combat, which I think is a nice balance. The one thing nice about faction warfare was it was always an ISK reward for combat, for PvP. So to bump that up a little bit may encourage more PvP in faction warfare.
Yeah, I'm definitely all for that. I exploited the whole running missions myself. I think I still have an alt on one of my accounts somewhere for every single one of the factions. Basically, whenever back in the day before LP got super devalued, it used to be like once it hit level 5, you basically dropped everything you were doing to. But so originally level 5 gave you reduced cost and not increased rewards, but that they fixed that relatively quickly. But even for a while afterwards, whenever a faction went tier 5, that was basically drop everything and go run it, because you're making it was 100,000 or more LP for a single mission, and you just put together a chain of 10 to 15 missions and run them in like 45 minutes. It's well over 1 million LP an hour, and at least at the time, faction warfare LP was worth a little bit more than the level 5 LP, which has been tanked for ages because that's been very 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 easy to farm. So that's definitely a good thing that they're swapping it a little bit away from that and more towards PvP. The only issue that we have with that is still if it ever becomes too profitable, you end up with, like I said, I have an alt in every single one. Way back, I think Goons actually did it where they were loading up. They sell. I want to say
like win trading.
Yeah, they'd sell like 100 items to an alt for a crazy price, and it's relisted over and over and over again. At the time, CCP's algorithm was calculating that to be whatever the actual value was. So if you have this random Kumak, which is suddenly worth $1 billion a piece because it's been selling for that, you put those in a ship and blow it up, you'd get a shitload of LP. So you definitely don't want a situation like that to happen again. And obviously they fixed that particular instance. But if it gets to be too much, I know minerals were cheap for a while. I could see some goon building like 800 Dominixes or something and shooting them with his alt just to cash out on top of the insurance for a T1 hull, and on top of that you get the LP payout. If that suddenly becomes profitable, that's a problem. So you can't unfortunately incentivize PvP too much there, which is a real shame, honestly.
Yeah, because what you're talking about is the LP you're rewarded per kill is based on the value of the ship, right? So if that's the case, it can be gameable. And I remember when I was at FanFest 2 years ago, we brought up this idea of giving more for the kill, and Fozzie brought up that exact scenario at the roundtable that you just mentioned, and that they wanted to be careful about. So I'm confident that they're watching for that, because Fozzie said it to my face, and that this slight bump in that direction probably won't get it there. But you're absolutely right. We always got to be careful because EVE players will game everything, right?
So absolutely, yeah. And that's the thing, is that at the same time, they definitely, it was basically worthless to kill people in faction warfare. It was just pocket change. It wasn't anything actually good. So there's definitely, CCP over nerfed it in response to the goon thing. So there's definitely room to buff it like they have, and maybe buff it even more. I'm not sure on the details of how much they've buffed it. So
yeah, and then the last two changes are kind of cool. They're adding a complex for battleship size and smaller, which is kind of neat. So like in faction warfare, you have the novice, which is faction frigates and down, and then a small complex, which is destroyers and down. Medium, you have cruisers and down, and a large, which is just everything, ungated, anything can go in. So another plex for battleship and down is neat, and CCP's been trying to add love to battleships, right? They're going to give it this frigate ejection bay. They buffed its warp speed a little while ago, and now there's a plex that's designed for it, which is pretty neat. I don't know if any of this is really going to push battleships back into meta, but it's pretty neat. And I always liked plexes because it kind of adds terrain to the map, right? There's terrain there. Only like the infantry can get in there. You can bring your big tank over here, but it can't get through the rock, I like all that stuff.
Yeah, I'm definitely for that, and I definitely agree that I think previous to this there was no there were large plexes where you could bring stuff into. You couldn't sinos in them, so far as I know.
Yeah, no, they're all dead space and no sinos. Yeah.
But they were ungated, so you'd have people basically if you want to have a battleship fight, people can just get a bunch of supers or dreads or
you can have supers and caps in there. Yep.
Yeah, they just warp right in. So there really was no spot for people to use battleships. I mean, way back in the day, we used battleships all the time. Back when I was in faction warfare, way back, I mean, that was the original Armageddon was a laser boat, and that was so much fun to fly around it. I mean, there was good small scale stuff like that, and battleships have basically dropped out of the meta for most people because you just drop a bunch of caps on them and they die, and you're better off using something like hacks or gillas or eagles and unions and stuff like that. That are not only mobile, but they are they're hard for caps to hit. I mean, that's why nightmares for a while were pretty much the only major battleship doctrine outside of Max, because nightmares are so easy to they're very mobile. They're constantly moving. It's hard to pin them down and drop a bunch of caps on them. So hopefully we'll have more stuff like that. Like when we fly Napox, Abaddons and stuff. Just because we don't have people dropping 3,000 fucking Titans on us every time we undock a battleship. So
yeah, place for battleships is cool. And then another good change that they're trying to address that low sectors and faction warfare guys have been complaining about is the whole gate slide mechanic. It used to be that if you were a frigate and you wanted to go into a novice plex, you could warp to the beacon in space at 10, and so long as you were mashing activate, you could come out of warp and get right into the warp gate without any tick. So you could just slide the gate. And then they introduced the check on warp core stabs, which introduced a tick in there. So now if you warp to that complex and you're mashing activate, if somebody's there in an insta-locking Loki or something like that, they can catch you before you slide your frigate into that novice plex. And that's kind of crappy because I want to fight frigates. Here I am trying to get into my novice plex and someone's trolling the gate and I can't get in there. So it looks like they're increasing the radius where you can activate that gate so you can warp in at a larger range, and that's less likely. I'm not so sure how much this is going to help, but hey, at least they're listening, right?
So normally I don't like those kind of changes. I don't particularly like that. I feel like it almost can result in a little bit less conflict, but at the same time, I definitely agree that they've made a decision to make these things, specifically frigate only, destroyer, cruiser down, battlecruiser down, and of course now battleship down. I think that the gate sliding mechanic is a good change in order to keep the spirit of that. Like the spirit of the frigate plexes isn't to have someone with an insta-lock Loki sitting on a frigate plex, shooting frigates. It's there for frigates to fight each other. And I definitely think that the game that's a game change that's a little more focused on what their intent is, and I kind of like that in this particular instance.
Yeah, agreed. All right, well, the last things I wanted to mention was that there are upcoming Eve meets. I'm not sure, and everyone should check. I haven't heard the status in any of this stuff, but with the growing concern of COVID and the coronavirus globally, I'm not sure how much of this is going to continue. I really do hope that we can, but everyone should be very careful. But you have Eve New Orleans that's scheduled for May. You have Eve North that's scheduled for June 26th, Eve Northeast, which is August 7th, and Eve Vegas, which is a player-run event now, on October 23rd. I pray to God by the time we get to the summer that we're past this nightmare and that we can do our thing as Eve people. I'm very upset that I can't go to FanFest this year in Iceland. It's a fantastic thing, and if anybody out there have not been to an Eve meet yet, I highly recommend it. So I hope these events continue as planned, but everyone should be safe and check your arrangements.
Yeah, no, definitely. That's I'm hoping that in a couple months, we'll everyone talks about flattening the curve. I'm hoping in a couple months we'll be solidly on the down part of that curve.
Yeah.
And of course, hopefully by October it'll be an unfortunate thing that happened and not a current thing. So I'm getting sick and tired of working from home. This is the first chance I've had to wear my work clothes in a couple days because
Yeah, I live in New York. I've been working from home for the past couple of weeks now, and now we've got no bars to go to and probably a curfew coming soon. But this is all important to flatten out that curve, like you said, and get this thing killed quickly. The last thing I wanted to say is that next week we'll continue our talk about Vale the Violent, and we'll have the brand new bros on to talk to us about what they've been doing. They've been in the area. Have you seen much of them?
We personally haven't. They moved into, I want to say, the pocket just above where Echoes moved in the IPA area, and of course just south of Echoes' original pocket. But basically, I think they've been shooting them a little bit. We personally haven't seen too much of them, but assuming that they are independent and not going to immediately start trying to blob up with other groups in the area. I mean, I'm more for that. Like in the ideal world, I would have a different group in every single constellation in Vale, and just everyone shooting each other all the time, like it was in the old days. Like that makes for a better Eve, I think.
That would be fantastic. And before I end the show, because I don't want Artemis mad at me, he likes to do this section called Something You May Not Know About EVE Online. And we semi-prep our guests for this, but Lord, if you had to communicate somebody to that may be in EVE or out of EVE, something they may not know, maybe history, maybe a mechanic, maybe, I don't know, some sort of gameplay, what would you say is something that people may not know about EVE Online?
Well, I was going to do something else, but since we're talking about faction warfare, I don't believe this has been fixed yet. We could probably apply a fix similar to what they did with faction standings and missions. You couldn't perma-pull missions. But so the existing exploit that's still an issue in faction warfare is the blue militia alts. Similar to you said the suspect mechanics, right? Like, a slicer can't shoot a Fed Navy comet until it engages it. The same applies for people in your militia. So if you have a character in Mimitar Militia, an Mimitar Corp, and you go running around the Mimitar Plexes, and you want to go shoot slicers in your Fed Navy Comet, they can't shoot you without incurring a hefty standing loss of their own, unless you shoot them first, in which case you incur the standing loss. So a similar kind of situation, which kind of undoes all of that. Normally, if you shoot someone enough, you get a abysmal Mimitar standing or whatever, and you get kicked the hell out of Mimitar Militia. The problem at the time was it was based, I think it still is, it was based off of your corpse standing. So back in the day, I knew people, I think I might have done this a little myself with Tackle basically, but you have a corp with, say, 10 characters. 6 of them are your faction warfare mission alts. They have ace Mimitar standing, say 10 standing piece, right? And the other 4 are all -10 to Mimitar because all you do is AWOX the fuck out of people and shoot people. You still end up, if you average your 4 bads with your 6 goods, you basically end up with a corporation that has a high standing still towards Mimitar Militia. So basically you have free reign to have, Mimitar, Brutor Killer 115, and you can do that as you can have characters that do that and they're still in Mimitar Militia because they won't get removed, which is a bit of a problem because it's that the whole that basically gets around the suspect thing. So if people want to abuse the hell out of that, feel free to abuse that and hopefully get CCP to fix that part. And of course, if I'm wrong and CCP already fixed it, then forget everything I just said. But that's my main concern with this faction warfare thing. I think that's still an outstanding issue.
Yeah, I agree, and I believe that is still the case. Your faction standing in militia is based on your corp standing. So if you have overwhelmingly good, you can have one or two bads that are going around blue, basically shooting blues with no penalty. I was going to do something else, but I will feel like I'll add to this. The problem gets even worse if you're a Minmatar faction warfare pilot and you go over to Galente space. You are blue to Galente faction warfare pilots. You can AWACS them with 0 penalty whatsoever because you don't get any hits to Minmatar. So go AWACS Galente pilots all day long. You're blue to them. You fly into the plex. You'll get the first shot because you're like, oh, blue, what's up, guy? That's also a problem. And
definitely.
I've been guilty of that myself, flying down to Minmatar space and AWACSing my Minmatar allies. But yeah, something you may not know about EVE Online.
Yeah, definitely.
I think that'll about do it for us here at Talking Station's midweek show. Thank you, Lord Servant, for coming on the show and talking to us. And
thanks for having me.
I will see you all guys next week.
Oh, and real quick.
Sure.
Frat, I'll see you guys in the battlefield in about 15 minutes, maybe.
Nice. Yes. I love it. All right, guys. Have a good night.